Hey everybody, it's Master Gallengeist here, bringing you my review for the season finale of Game of Thrones, The Dragon and the Wolf. And I really think this was a really good season finale for Game of Thrones because it really contracted the universe and really kind of like tied up loose plot threads and just got us set up for the endgame scenario going into season 8 and to figure out what's going to be going on there. So, where we start off is at King's Landing, and it's really kind of cool seeing the Unsullied pretty much arrayed before it, and we see Bronn and Jaime kind of talking about all their defenses, Bronn kind of ordering more pitch and everything, making sure that they have like at least 1,000 barrels of it, and him saying that he really likes being called a lord, and Jaime like, it wears off, and Bronn's like, if we live long enough for that. So then they start going in at the army, talking about pretty much their reasons to fight. Bronn being like, well, they're cockless. Why do they have any reason to fight? And Jaime's like, gold? Like, what would you what would you spend gold on then? Like your family. You're not having a family if you don't have a cock. So it was interesting to see their interplay of trying to figure out what the Unsullied are fighting for. And then, of course, we see the Dothraki come in, and they're also talking about how Tyrion's usually a champion of the downtrodden, and Bronn making the observation that it looks like we're about to be downtrodden, and we see the Dothraki come through the ranks of the Unsullied without even, like, ruffling their feathers. It's like, shit. So then, of course, we see an overview of King's Landing, and we see Euron's fleet, and we see the small contingent of ships for Daenerys. We get the scene of Tyrion kind of talking with Jon, kind of figuring out how many people there, like about 1 million, give or take. And Jon's like, that's more than all the people in the north put in one city. He's like, how do they live like that? And of course, Tyrion's like, well, they do it for work. And of course, the brothels are far superior. So it's cool, kind of like, because Jon's never been really this far south before. And just seeing him kind of acclimate himself to King's Landing, which is not a place that Starks have good memories of. So it was kind of cool to see him and Tyrion kind of like getting that kind of information. So we also see that the Hound goes down into the hold, and he's kind of checking on the White. He does one little knock on it, it goes apeshit, fucking screaming and everything. It's like, yeah, okay. So then, of course, we see a scene with Cersei kind of like talking about what's going on, them not knowing where Daenerys is, that she didn't come in with them, and of course they're like, alright, we're gonna go to the pit now. She gives the order to Sir Gregor that if anything happens, kill the silver-haired bitch first, then my brother, and then the bastard that calls himself king, and then anybody else, any order she fit. Showing that she doesn't give a crap as long as if this goes south, everybody else gets taken down with her. So, and we see Jon and Co. kind of strolling in, and we're getting a little bit more backstory of like what's going on with the Dragon Pit. Missandei's the one that pretty much asks the question. Jorah kind of goes into it saying that dragons don't go by our rules. They don't understand the difference between what's ours and what's theirs, so they would go and take like land, livestock, children. This was kind of built to keep them in one spot. And of course, Tyrion's talking about how it was kind of like a sad joke that towards the end of it, they were just sickly creatures no bigger than a dog, when in the beginning this was home to Balerion the Dread. And he's like, it had to have been one of the most dangerous places around in the world. And then, of course, they meet up with Bronn and his retinue, which has Brienne and Podrick in it as well. And, of course, everybody's like, well, it still could be. So, of course, Bronn's like, well, I've been sent to escort you guys, so let's keep going. Then we get a nice kind of reunion with Podrick and Tyrion. Kind of like, oh, it's a pleasant surprise in an unpleasant situation, and that they never see each other again. And it's kind of weird seeing that they're on kind of like opposite sides, where actually Pod's not really on an opposite side. He's on with Brienne and the Starks. So it was kind of like a little bit weird. But then, of course, Tyrion doesn't know about Jon bending the knee to Daenerys. So they're like saying that they're glad they're alive. Of course, Bronn's like, you can suck his magic cock later, let's go. So, of course, then we get to see kind of the Hound kind of talking with Brienne, and of course, we see a Lannister dude talking like, what's in the box? And he's like, fuck off. So, of course, Brienne kind of holds back, and he gets some information on Arya. And Of course, Brienne's like, I thought you were dead. And he's like, not yet. I mean, you came pretty close. And she's like, I was only trying to protect her. And he's like, you and me both. And it's kind of cool seeing them bond over this, trying to protect Arya. And she's like, well, she's alive, and she's in Winterfell. And he's like, well, if you're here, who's protecting her? And she's like, well, the one who would need protecting is the one who would get in her way. And he's like, that's not going to be me. And we see them kind of like smiling at that because they're both kind of like proud of her being able to hold her own like that. So then we see kind of like Tyrion getting all along with like Ron and everything, saying, "Oh, here's this reunion of the heroes of Blackwater Bay and all that." And he's like, "Yeah, it is, my lord," because Podrick, of course, is going a little bit in, but he's like, "I'm not a lord anymore." But if you were going with titles, we've got Sir Bronn of the Blackwater here. And of course, he's like, well, I guess your new queen would be happy to restore those if she's the one that wins the throne. And he's like, well, you wouldn't have agreed to help me, like, set this up if you weren't, like, thinking of your own best interest and doing your allegiances. And, of course, Ron really goes into his explanation saying, I'm bringing in 2 traitors who the queen would pay to have their heads lopped off. Yeah, and that's all thanks to me. So, yeah, this is me looking after myself. So, I don't know what else is. And then, of course, Tyrion's like, well, it's good to see you again. And he's like, yeah, you too. And it was kind of cool to see them still be friends after all this time, even though they kind of like went their separate ways. So, of course, we see the Hound leave the crate with the threat that if anybody like touches it, I kill you first. And then we get to the dragon pit. We see it kind of get all set up. We see everybody come in, everybody looking around, wondering where the trap is. We see Bronn take Podrick to have a drink while the fancy folk talk, and that, of course, makes it seem like he's trying to protect him from a setup or whatnot, or from a trap, so it kind of sets that kind of tension going in. So, of course, we then get Tyrion talking to the Hound, and the Hound's just pretty much trying to, like, be like, I left this shit city because I didn't want to die in this city. Am I going to die in this shit city? And he's like, well, you just might. And he's like, it seems like every bad idea has a Lannister cut behind it. And then, of course, Tyrion fires back, and a Clegane cunt to help them see it through. Just showing the kind of history of their houses, how, of course, Tywin used the mountain to kill Elia Martell and Rhaegar's children, how Cersei is using the mountain again, and how the Hound has now gotten into the employ of Tyrion. Well, not really the employ, but they're in the same group at the moment. So, of course, Cersei and her retinue enter. Everybody's still doing their kind of like character looks and all that. And she sits down, and then we get the Hound going up to the mountain, and him like talking to him, and they're like, yeah, you remember me. This isn't how it ends for you, brother. You might be uglier than me, but I'm going to be the one that takes you out. Always known it. And then he like walks up and like, that's pretty cool, because the Hound went right up, and the mountain kind of met him, not sure what he was going to do. I was like, yeah, that's pretty cool. So we'll probably get a Clegane Bowl at some point, because it just thematically and narratively needs to work that way. Because otherwise there's no payoff. Now granted, if there's certain other kind of elements put into it that could like really ramp that up and make it better, I have no problem with that. But there has to be some kind of resolution with that. Otherwise it's like, why is the Hound around? Why keep the mountain as a bodyguard of zombie proportions? So we'll have to see where that leads. So then we get Cersei asking where Dany is. And of course, she's like kind of pissed off that she's not here. And then of course Dany comes in on her dragon Drogon and apologizes for being late and everything. So then we get into the meat of what's starting to happen. Tyrion gets up to try and get the meeting started, but then Euron, of course, starts making fun of Theon. Says, if you don't submit here right now, I'm going to kill your sister. And he's like, don't we have larger concerns than this? He's like, you're the smallest concern. And he's like talking to Theon like, oh, dwarf jokes? And he's like, his wasn't even good. He explained it at the end. You don't do that. It ruins the joke. And then he gets into like, your kind we kill in the Iron Islands at birth. It's a mercy to the parents and everything. And, of course, he's like, why don't you sit down? Jaime does. And he's like, why? And then Cersei's like, sit down or leave. And, of course, the mountain moves in to kind of like show himself, and then Euron does it. He sits down and they're like, all right, fine. So of course Tyrion's like, starts really getting into it. We have no reason to trust each other. We've screwed each other over. We've suffered. We lost loved ones. Yeah. We've got a lot of fucked up shit going on. And we could have waged war on each other without doing this face to face. And she's like, oh, so we're just supposed to be here and be in happy harmony and everything for the rest of our days and all that. Oh, joy. And then, of course, Jon goes up and he's like, it's not about living in harmony. It's about living. And it's the thing that's coming is coming for assault. It's a general that you cannot negotiate with. It's an army that doesn't leave corpses behind. And he brings up the number of 1 million people in King's Landing. That's 1 million more soldiers that are about to be in the army of the dead. Of course, Cersei fires off the quip. Now, that could be an improvement for most of them. And Jon walks up and he's like, this is serious. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't serious. Because he's showing this. I tactically wouldn't come up here like this if there was a problem. If we were just dealing with you, we would have come into King's Landing, surrounded your ass, used the dragons to burn down the keep, pretty much been done with this without even talking to you. And of course, Cersei's like, it is a bad joke. It's, if I'm informed correctly, you asked for a truce. And of course, Dany's like, yep, that's all. And she's like, oh yeah, so I can pull back my armies, not know what you're doing, then you come back with 4 times the men and just take us all out. And then of course, Tyrion's like bringing up, like, nothing's gonna like change the last 50 years. But we have something to show you. So of course, then we see the Hound come out of the steps with the box on his back, just carrying it by himself, which was pretty awesome. So then he like opens it up and seeing him kind of like being trepidatious about it and then just like kicking it over. And then of course we see the White come out crazy, charging right at Cersei. And it's like seeing her shock and everything was great because what the fuck? And of course the White's got a chain on it and the Hound like rips it back. And then it of course goes for him and he chops it in half. And then we see the bottom half moving. We see the top half moving around and everything. And of course, Qyburn is enthralled by this. He's like, what the fuck is this thing? It's a dead body that is moving on its own. This is more perfect than kind of what I've done possibly or another avenue. So he goes up. The White is kind of like clawing at the Hound. He like chops off one of its arms. And of course, Jon goes over to it with Davos. Davos lights off a torch. And he's like, there's only way to destroy these are to burn it. And he burns the hand. And you see the White going, ah. And then he's like, the other way is Dragonglass. And he pulls out a Dragonglass dagger that they made and he stabs it to kill it. And then, of course, he's like, okay, if we don't win this fight, then this is the fate of every person in the world. And it's the only war that matters, the Great War. And of course, Dany's like, I didn't believe it until I saw him. And of course, Jaime's like, how many of them did you see up there? And she's like, 100,000 at least. And he's like freaked out. He's like, Jesus, Jaime at least gets the gravity of this situation. 100,000 army that doesn't need to eat, doesn't need to sleep, can replenish itself with the dead. He understands the severity of the situation. He's like, holy crap. Euron gets up, inspects the corpses, like, can they swim? Jon says no, and he's like, alright then, I'm going back to my island. Okay, then he advises Dany to do the same way out the winter, and we'll be the only ones that survive. So then he leaves, and of course, Cersei's like, well, he's right to be afraid and be a coward, and if we don't face this threat, there won't be a 7 kingdoms left to rule over, and everything we've suffered for and lost will be for nothing. The Crown accepts the truce under the condition that the King of the North stays in the North, doesn't bear arms against the Lannisters, and doesn't choose any sides. And of course, Dany's like, why not? Why don't you ask the same thing of me? You wouldn't do it, and I would trust you less if you accepted it. And of course, Jon pretty much comes out and says, I can't. Because she pulls the card of, you're Ned Stark's son. Ned Stark held to his word, you'll hold to your word. He's like, I try to be true to my word, and that's why I can't do what you ask. I can't serve 2 queens. I pledge myself to Dany. Of course, Cersei's like, there's nothing more to discuss then. Pissed off, and he's like, all of you can die in the North first. Enjoy dealing with this. And then, of course, they start walking off. Brienne goes to Jaime, and Jamie's like, well, it's good to see you, but next time we see each other, we'll probably be foes across the battlefield. And she's like, listen, you gotta talk to your queen. We need to do this. You saw what happened. You saw the thing. Yes, I'm not looking forward to seeing them, but I'm loyal to my queen. You're loyal to Sansa and that dolt of a brother of hers. And she's like, fuck loyalty. This is an important kind of character moment for Brienne because loyalty defines her. When she is in a situation where she has to say fuck loyalty, that's a big thing. Even Jamie's like, what? And she's like, this is beyond houses and honors and oath. You gotta talk to your queen. And, of course, the rest are leaving, and he's like, I'll see what I can do. Tyrion and everybody else are kind of like pissed off at Jon. Like, Dany's like, I'm grateful for what you did, but you could have lied to her. And Tyrion's like, yeah, I'm glad that you bent the knee to her, but you need to learn to lie. And then, of course, Jon's like, I don't swear an oath that I can't uphold. You talk about my father if you want. The attitude got him killed. Enough people make false promises. Words stop meaning anything. Then, no more answers, only better and better lies. Lies won't help on this fight. And I really like Jon standing up for himself on that. He has come into the den of his enemies. He believes that the only way to truly kind of come through this is to be honest and just fucking cut this shit and be like, listen, you either help us or you don't. We either win or we don't, and everybody's dead. I agree with Jon on this, because if everybody just operates like Littlefinger, you just get into a nihilistic cycle of just killing everybody until the one great threat, the White Walkers, come, that one world-ending thing, and just wipes everybody out. So, yeah, you guys can be pissed off at Jon. I'm more on his side. So, of course, they're trying to figure out what to do. It's like, well, the immediate problem is we're fucked, so I guess I'm going to go talk to my sister. It's the only option. Jon, of course, volunteers, but Tyrion's like, she'll definitely murder you. So I'm going to go see what I can do. So, of course, then we see Tyrion going into the Red Keep, followed by the mountain, and we see a cool scene with Jaime and him. He's like, I tried to talk to her until she kicked me out. I guess we're both kind of idiots, because I talked to you about this, you agreed to come here, but I guess idiot to idiot, well, I suppose we should say kind of like our farewells because we don't know what's going to happen here. And it's kind of cool seeing that they still have that brotherly bond. Yes, Tyrion killed their father, but he had serious grievances against the guy, you know? And I kind of more side with Tyrion on it. And Tyrion didn't do it out of truly malicious intent, I believe. I think it just was so many things piled up one on the other that he snapped, and it was the decision that he thought was right at the time. And I'm kind of glad to see Jaime still, yeah, he's got a problem with that. He's never going to kind of let that go, but he's not going to let it truly affect his relationship with Tyrion. So, of course, we see Tyrion go into the room with Cersei, and we get, this is a really cool scene, because we haven't seen these two together for a while, and just seen them kind of snipe at each other. Cersei calling Dany a foreign whore and all that kind of stuff, and he's firing back, yeah, when you can't abduct or intimidate or beat, so yeah, that gotta be difficult for you. And, of course, bringing her here with her pet foreigner and everything, pet northerner, and he's like, I didn't know about that, trying to kind of like diffuse what was going on, and he's like, I'm trying to work towards this goal of protecting the family, and she's holding it against him of destroying the family, because killing Tywin, because she holds him responsible for the deaths of Myrcella and Tommen. Because him killing Tywin pretty much left the family open, which I think is bullshit response, because if that's the case, you don't learn anything from your father. At all. Because if you had truly learned all the lessons from Tywin, you would have been able to protect yourselves. And I think it's really bullshit to lay down Myrcella and Tommen on Tyrion, because greatly she doesn't put Joffrey on there, thankfully. But Myrcella was more on Tywin because he ordered the Mountain to kill Elia Martell and her children. This, of course, set up the whole feud with the Dornish and House Lannister. So that is on Tywin, not Tyrion, Tywin. Tommen is on Cersei because she annihilated everyone in the Sept of Baelor and killed Tommen's wife. If you are Tommen and you see that your mother is trying to control you in such a degree that she will kill your wife. How else is someone supposed to react if they feel that they are never going to be in control of their life with a parent like that? Of course he's going to throw himself out a window to kill himself. That is on you, Cersei, not on Tyrion. Not on the weakened position of your family that happened when Tywin died. And of course, Tyrion gets pissed off at it and says, you know what? If you hold that, order them out to kill me. Do it. And we get this tense moment. We think that Cersei could do it, but she doesn't. I'm like, wow, that's interesting. So, of course, Tyrion goes over, pours himself a glass of wine, drinks it, and then pours her one and pushes it towards her. And it's like, listen, we have to do something. We just have to, kind of get through this. You saw what was going on. What is going on with these whites and everything. And, of course, she's like, no, the world didn't, it's swallowed up to me. Just to protect what's mine and my family's and everything. And of course, Tyrion then gets to the point of, oh, you're pregnant and everything. It's like, holy shit. But I don't know if that's true. I still think that she's trying to pull a game and that Qyburn has possibly done something. I don't know. He is a mad scientist. We had also gotten into her talking about, Dany and all that, bringing, of course, Tyrion, yeah, she didn't want to come here. She wanted to bring fire and blood and destroy this whole place. But, of course, me as her advisor, I checked her worst impulses. Cersei, of course, is talking about not checking her worst impulses, which is going to be her downfall. So, of course, they're talking about all that, and they get to the pregnancy thing. It's like, wow, okay. Then we get to a scene between Jon and Dany in the pit, and of course they're kind of talking about the significance of the dragon's pit and everything. She speaks the phrase in Valyrian that a dragon is not a slave. And they were terrifying and extraordinary and filled people with awe and wonder, and we just locked them in here and they wasted away and they grew small and we grew small with them. And we're not extraordinary without them. And Jon's like, well, you're not like everyone else. And your family's not done yet. And of course, she's like, I can't have children. He's like, who told you that? The witch that murdered my husband. And of course, he's like, well, have you ever thought that she's not a reliable source of information? And of course, seeing Dany kind of smile at that was kind of cool because Jon rarely makes jokes, but this was a pretty good joke to kind of make. I was like, okay. So of course, he's like, I'm sorry. I know everything's kind of fucked, but yeah, of course, she's like, it's alright. I can't forget what I should have trusted you from the beginning. I can't forget what I saw north of the wall, and we've got to, I can't pretend that I didn't see that. But I also can't pretend that Cersei's not going to try and take back everything once I go north, so we're kind of stuck in a catch-22. So of course we see Tyrion come back, and we see Cersei and her retinue come back, and she agrees to send the troops and call the banners north, and pretty much saying, I want you to remember this, that I didn't have any assurances from you, even though I expect you not to. Jon, of course, is surprised and looks over at Tyrion and is like, oh, okay. So that's kind of the wrap-up of the meeting with the Dragon Pit. Then we get to Winterfell with Sansa and Littlefinger, and this whole scene pissed me off kind of the first time I saw it, but of course later on we learned some things. Littlefinger is still trying to pretty much manipulate Sansa into killing Arya, or getting into a position to get rid of Arya, or just keep the strife kind of going. And he's pretty much he's like, whenever I try and figure out a person's motivations, I play a little game. What's the worst reason they have for doing what they're doing? And pretty much walks through all this stuff like, she came here to kill you, she unearthed that scroll to have proof of your betrayals against the Stark family and everything, and kind of justify the action to become Lady of Winterfell. And of course, you think that Sansa is believing this and actually agreeing with Littlefinger when we have had confirmation that Arya doesn't want to be Lady of Winterfell. She has never wanted to be a proper lady. She wanted to be a knight. So you're thinking, Sansa, why haven't you learned what's going on? And of course, Littlefinger seems smug that she's come to these conclusions and is like, I'm winning. So, of course, that's the end of that scene, and we see Dragonstone, and we see Jon and co. kind of like talking about what's going on, sending the little Thraki up the King's Road and everything, getting to Winterfell and all that, to get the forces together to get the Unsullied sailed into White Harbor and everything, and kind of go forth as allies. Jorah, of course, thinks that that kind of puts Daenerys at risk going on the King's Road, and instead advises her to fly to Winterfell, because that there could be somebody with a crossbow or whatnot who thinks, oh, see silver hair, I could be a hero because of all the bad things that the Targaryens have done to the Northerners, kind of take it as revenge and all that. Of course, she says, I've come not to conquer the North, but to save it, so I'm going to, of course, sail. And, of course, she kind of like looks at Jon. Jorah kind of looks at Jon and like, crap. He's like, dang it. But it's not like pissed off, but you can see it in his face that he's kind of like dejected a little bit. So then we get a cool scene in the throne room at Dragonstone of Theon and Jon, and Theon kind of like trying to explain himself to Jon and the anguish he's had. You've always known what to do and do the right thing. I never knew that. I always felt like I had to choose between being a Stark and a Greyjoy. Of course, Jon's pretty much like, listen, it might look like that from the outside, but I've got regrets. And yeah, I don't know always the right thing to do, and I don't try and put that on. And he's like, our father was more of a father to you than your own father. And what you did was you betrayed him. You betrayed his memory, but you never lost him. He's a part of you, just like he's a part of the things that we, just like he's a part of me. And he's like, I can't forgive you for all the things you've done, but what I can forgive you for, I do. And that's a big kind of thing. It's cool for Jon to be able to let go for certain things. And he's like, you don't need to choose between a Greyjoy. You don't have to choose. You could be a Greyjoy and a Stark, which, of course, is foreshadowing Jon's eventual conflict that's going to come up between being a Stark and a Targaryen. So it's like, yeah, hopefully you remember this. And, of course, Theon brings up, when I was a prisoner of Ramsay, the only person that tried to rescue me, that tried to save me, was Yara. And I let her down. And she needs me now. And, of course, Jon's like, well, then why are you still here talking to me? And then he walks off and is like, yeah, go save your sister and all that. So, of course, then we see Theon talking with his Ironborn crewmates. We see the lieutenant pretty much saying, all right, our plan is pretty much not go and save Yara, but to go find an island, kill all the men, and take all their wives. And, of course, Theon's like, no. Yara said we're not doing that anymore. We're going to go save Yara. Of course, this starts a fight where Theon's getting really, like, the shit beaten out of him. And, of course, the dude's like, if you keep getting up, I'm going to kill you. And he gets to a point where he knees him in the groin, and that doesn't do anything. So this kind of like brings up Theon to just fucking let loose, headbutts him, and just starts beating the crap out of him until he becomes unconscious. So then he gets up, and one dude kind of like helps him steady himself, and the rest, he's like, for Yara, and the rest say Yara, and they're getting ready to go and save Yara. So it's like, cool. He goes into the ocean, splashes his face with the water and everything, and it's like, alright, I want to see Theon kind of like not become who he used to be, but become someone who can come to terms with all the stuff that he's suffered and try and be the best person that he can be. And hopefully he's able to have that before whatever fate befalls him. So, then we get to Winterfell again with Sansa, and she tells to her guard, because she's on the battlements, to call her sister to the Great Hall. And this is important because this is a culmination of a lot of stuff that has happened over the years, and it's a pretty cool scene. So, of course, we see that Arya's brought in, we see all these people lined up, we see Lord Royce of the Vale, and we get this kind of tense scene. And I gotta hand it to the showrunners for what they have done to get us to this point, and I think they did a pretty good job because I thought that there was like a lot of tension between Sansa and Arya, and that Sansa had not learned as much as she had. But of course we get into it, and Arya's like, are you sure you want to do this? And she's like, it's not what I want to do, it's what honor demands. And it defends the family from those that would harm us and betray the North. And she's like, all right then, get on with it. And she says, you stand accused of murder and treason. And, of course, you're like, how is Arya accused of murder? She hasn't killed anybody since she got back to Winterfell. And then, of course, she's like, how do you answer these charges? Lord Baelish. And we've seen, this is the point where Baelish gets screwed over. It's really cool to see. Because Baelish is, like, so confused. That look on his face was just priceless. So, of course, he's like, I'm kind of confused. What's going on? So first I'll start with the simplest one. You murdered my aunt, Liza, by pushing you through the moon door. And, of course, he's like, I did that to protect you. And she's like, you did that to get the veil. And earlier you conspired to murder Jon Arryn. And you gave Liza the Tears of Lys to poison him. Do you deny it? And he's like, listen, your aunt was crazy. She don't know what you're talking about. She imagined enemies everywhere. And then she keeps going in. Sent a letter to our parents telling them that the Lannister had murdered Jon when it was you. And you wanted conflict between the Starks and the Lannisters. It was you who started it. Do you deny any of this? And he's like, I don't know of any letter. And of course, talking about conspiracy with Cersei Lannister and Joffrey Baratheon to betray Ned. Thanks to treachery, he was imprisoned and executed on false charges of treason. And he's like, none of you were there to see it happen. None of you know the truth. And then, of course, Bran, of course, the key to it is like, you held a knife to his throat. And then, of course, he looks at him and was like, you said, I warned you not to trust me. And then, of course, Arya's like, you told my mother that this knife belonged to Tyrion, but it actually belonged to you. And he completely underestimated Bran. Because he was a potent source of information to really undo him. And to find all the stuff that would truly bring him down. And, of course, he tries to go to Sansa. He's known you since you were a young girl. I wanted to protect you. And she's like, protect me? You sold me to the Boltons. And he's like, can we speak alone? I can explain everything. And sometimes, if I want to know a person's motivations, I like to play a little game. Pretty much screwing them over. And she's like, you pretty much just always wanted to turn family against family. You wanted to turn my sister against me, and me against her. You did it with our mother and our aunt. And he's like, Sansa, please. And she's like, I'm a slow learner, true, but I learn. And I was like, yes. This helps solidify Sansa's story arc and showing that she has actually learned stuff. Because at first she kept talking about how she won the Battle of the Bastards, and I'm like, you have to know about Baelish. This moment shows that she did win the Battle of the Bastards if she was truly figuring out how to expertly maneuver Littlefinger into a position that she could actually take him out effectively. Because that's the only way it works. Because at the moment, you could say that she had won the Battle of the Bastards, but we see that it was only through the power that she was manipulating through Littlefinger. Seeing her being able to understand that and understand his manipulative nature and then to expertly enclose him in the trap like this was great to see and a great growth and a great character moment for her and just showing her fucking someone over who has fucked her over so much. It's like, yes. So, of course, he tries to get Lord Royce to take him back to the Eyrie. He's like, nope, not going to do that. And he sees no other allies around him. He starts trying to beg. He's like, I loved your mother since I was a boy. And she's like, well, you betrayed her. He's like, I've loved you more than anyone, and you betrayed me. And then he kind of starts crying. He's like, when you brought me to Winterfell, you told me that there's no justice in the world unless we make it. Thank you for all your many lessons. And then I will never forget them. And then nods to Arya. Arya goes up, slices his throat with the cat's paw dagger, and he just bleeds out and dies. It's like, yes. This was a pretty good end in my opinion. To Littlefinger showing his arrogance in not understanding the power of Bran to get the information needed to effectively trap him in this scenario. Because he's always 10 steps ahead with all that kind of stuff unless someone can figure out his tracks, which Bran was able to do. So I was like, yes. So, of course, then we go to Cersei and Jaime. Jaime pretty much planning the expedition in the north, and she has him send away all the lords and says, I knew you were the stupidest of the Lannisters, and pretty much just shows her berating him and trying to control him and manipulate him, and seeing that this is the final straw for him, and him breaking kind of free of that is really cool. Because she's like, I only told him what they wanted to, so that way I could protect the family and everything. And of course, he's like, I pledged my forces for a common enemy. I told him I was going to go north. And she's like, that's stupid. That's treason to do that. To go and fight with your enemies. And he's like, you saw with your own eyes a dead man trying to kill us. And if dragons can't stop him, the Dothraki can't stop him, Unsullied, Northmen, how will our armies make any difference? He's like, this isn't about like noble houses. It's about the living and the dead. And she's like, I tend to stay among the living. And let them defend the north. We'll stay here as always. And he's like, I made a promise. And he's like, our child will rule Westeros. He's like, our child will never be born if the dead come south. And she's like, monsters are real. I got that. But let them all fight and kill each other. And he's like, come on. If someone wins in the north, no matter what, the dead win, they come south, they kill us. If the living win, they come south and they kill us because we betrayed them. And of course, she's just like, they already want to kill us all. So, we can't feed them in the field. And she's talking about the dragons. She was smart enough. She's like, did you notice how many dragons she brought? Only 2. What happened to the third? That shows that they're vulnerable. And of course, Jaime doesn't give a crap. Yeah, that's one variable. There's still 2 dragons. And, of course, he's like, what about the Dothraki and the Unsullied? We don't have the power to go up against that much. And she's like, did you never listen to Father on the importance of gold? And pretty much says that the Iron Bank is securing the Golden Company for us as we speak. And that he's like, how is a mercenary army in Essos going to help us here? She's like, Euron didn't leave us. He went to go get it and bring it back. And I'm like, this is going to probably be Cersei's downfall because she doesn't understand the importance of the Golden Company. The Golden Company was originally founded because the army of one of the Blackfire rebellions, one of the bastards of the Targaryens, was pushed out of Westeros. Their whole objective was to have enough gold and power to sail back home to Westeros. So, yeah, she's getting 20,000 men, horses, elephants, and all that. But, could they possibly have a Targaryen among them that they're following, or could they just come over and say, we support the Targaryens, fuck you, and take her out? She's not very... She does do some smart moves, but she never completely thinks anything through. She only thinks about herself and that she's the smartest person in the room. That has always been her true downfall. Yes, when she's backed into a corner, she's able to, more likely than not, get her way out of it. But this is a corner that she will not be able to get out of, and that she needs to truly understand how to get through to, but she won't. And of course, Jaime's like, oh, so you came up with this without consulting me? And she's like, yeah, just like you conspired with Tyrion and everything. And it's like, really? You're gonna go with that? And it's just like, he turns to leave, and of course the mountain blocks his way, and she's told him, I told you no one walks away from me. And he's like, are you gonna order him to kill me? And of course, if I'm all gone, you have no one left. And she's like, there'll be one more. And of course, the mountain. And then he's like, give the order then. And of course, the mountain unsheathes his sword. She's nodded to him. And of course, he had unsheathed his sword after the nod. And Jaime's kind of shocked. It's like, I don't believe you. And then he goes. And like, I thought that she was going to have him killed. I'm like, shit. But of course, he just goes through the map room, and Cersei kind of stops. She didn't, I don't know, belay the order, so I don't know how effectively that's going to be going through. So, of course, we see Jaime outside King's Landing. He's pretty much broken with his sister at this point because she doesn't give a crap, and he's kind of fed up with her manipulation. He is going to help with the war against the dead. And it's a good character moment to see Jaime kind of like coming to terms with all the stuff that he's done. And kind of finally figuring out that his sister does not really love him. She loves controlling him. So he's like putting a glove on his golden hand. We see snow coming, and he just rides on. We see snow in King's Landing and everything, and And we see the next truly important scene. We see Sam and Jilly coming into Winterfell. And we get a lot of good information here. He goes in to talk to Bran, and he's like, "Oh, Samwell Tarly." And he's like, "I wasn't sure you'd remember me." And he's like, "I remember everything. Come in." And, of course, you, helped us beyond the wall. You're a good man. He's like, "Oh, well, thank you. Not sure that I am, sir." And he's like, "What happened to you?" "I became the Three-Eyed Raven." "I have no idea what that means." So, of course, he's like, "So why are you here?" He's like, "I know that Jon's going to be the one to lead the fight against the dead, and I want to be here to help him." And, of course, he's like, "He's on his way." He's like, "Oh, did you see that vision?" Holds up the scroll, kind of like, "No, I have a scroll." He's like, "Oh, okay." And he's like, "He needs to know the truth about himself. No one but me knows. Jon isn't really his father's son. He is the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and my aunt, Lyanna Stark. He was born in a tower in Dorne. His last name is not really Snow, it's Sand." And of course, then we see that Sam was actually listening to Jilly and actually has that information in his head. He's like, "It's not." And he's like, "Dornish bastards are called Sand." He's like, "No, I transcribed a High Septon's diary. He annulled Rhaegar's marriage to Elia. He wed Rhaegar and Lyanna in a secret ceremony." And of course, Bran's like, "Are you sure about this?" He's like, "I don't know why the High Septon would, make this up or anything." And this just goes to show the limits of Bran's powers. He can see the past, he can see the present, but he can't hold all that information at once. So he only saw as far as he was going to look. And we see this pretty cool. He goes back and he kind of confirms it. We see the private ceremony of Rhaegar and Lyanna getting wed. And he's like, Robert's rebellion was built on a lie. Rhaegar didn't kidnap and rape Lyanna. He loved her and she loved him. And as this is interspersed, we see Jon on the ship with Dany. He goes to a room, knocks on the door. She opens it. He goes in, closes it. And we see Tyrion kind of looking on like, this is going to make some problems. And of course, Bran's kind of narrating. He's like, "Oh, we go back to Jon's birth and we find out his real name is Aegon Targaryen." And it's like, that's cool. Going back to the original Aegon. And we'll have to see how he kind of deals with that. And while that's going on, we see the promise that Ned and Lyanna had to have. Lyanna's like, "You have to protect him, Ned. Promise me that." And it's like, yeah, that was a pretty good way to protect him. But then we see, now the consequences of that, we see Jon and Dany having sex. It's like, oh, they're, nephew. But it's kind of weird because in this show we're like, oh, okay, this is kind of bad, but at least they're not the twin brother and sister. They know that they're related, getting it on. Here it's like, okay, there was no possible way for us to really know the fine specifics of this at this point. So, yeah, it's awkward, but, And, of course, it's interesting to see the scene because at first we see Dany on top, and then Jon kind of flips over and he's on top. And then, of course, we see Bran kind of narrating, he's never been a bastard. He's the heir to the Iron Throne. Now, this is important because I was looking into it, and per Martin, Jon is 8 to 9 months older than Dany. And you have to take into account, it's also not really age-related as much. We have to see the line of succession. Mad King Aerys, he had, his eldest son that he had was Rhaegar Targaryen. And then, of course, he had Viserys, and then he had Dany. So, what would happen is, if Aerys went, it would go to Rhaegar, or any of Rhaegar's children that he had. So it would be Rhaegar, and then, of course, any children he had with Elia, Jon Snow, Aegon Targaryen. Then Viserys, then Dany. So this is going to create a very interesting scenario because we don't know if Dany's going to accept this or fly off the handle and just get pissed off, and we've got two people on dragons going at each other at some point. I would like to think that her cooler head would prevail, but it depends upon who survives the Great War also. But we've already got an off-your situation where they have feelings for each other. They find out their aunt and nephew, and they find out that Jon has the better claim than Dany. Shit's going to get real, and it'll be interesting to see how that goes on. So, of course, Bran's like, he needs to know, we need to tell him. So, it's cool that he's including Sam in that. So then we get the scene with Arya and Sansa kind of like getting through what's going on. I mean, like, strange in a horrible way. I believe he really thought that he loved me, and of course Arya's like, you did the right thing, and she's like, well, you did it. And she's like, I'm just the executioner, you passed the sentence. And she's like, does it bother you that I'm the Lady of Winterfell? And she's like, I was never going to be as good as lady as you. And I don't think I could have survived what you went through. And she's like, you could have, you're the strongest person I know. And she's like, I believe that's the nicest thing you ever said to me. She's like, shut up, you're still weak, you're still strange and annoying. And then of course they start going into the words that their father said. In the winter, we must protect ourselves, look after one another. And of course they continue it, when snow falls and white winds blow, the lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. And of course they're both like, I miss him, and Sansa's like, I miss him too. And then we get the shot in the distance, and we get towards the final scene. We see Bran and the Weirwood warging into like ravens, and we get to the wall at Eastmarch. And of course we see the White Walker army appear before. We see Beric Dondarrion and Tormund atop the wall seeing this. We see some White Walkers come out, and we see the army of the dead. We see this giant kind of like storm behind them. We see the giants in the kind of like snowy mist as well. It's like, what's going to be going on? And we see that they're waiting for something. And then we see the Night King come out riding Viserion, and he's just like rah, screaming and screeching it, and it's really cool to see him with like the damaged wings and everything. It's like, what's going to be going on? And then he starts using blue fire and taking out a portion of the wall to have it collapse in the sea. We see Tormund and Beric, of course, are able to make their way across the wall, going more into the wall than actually going down, which is a smart maneuver because the wall's getting destroyed really by the fire, and it was really kind of cool to see the difference. I didn't know if it was ice at first, but since I was like, I usually do 2 watchings to kind of get the full effect and kind of take notes and figure out what's going on. And when you look at it, it is fire, but I didn't know if they'd turn to ice or whatnot, but I did look around online and see that it's like a different kind of fire. So it will be able to be a combatable difference for the like dragon fire of the other dragons. So this is pretty big, and seeing the destruction it's able to do to destroy the wall is great, because it shows another magical source going up against another magical source and coming out on top. And then we see, of course, the wall come down, and it's not all of it, but enough to go into the sea, and we see the White Walkers just have their army go down south. We see the Night King going into the distance. It's like, holy shit. This is big. It's like been 8,000 years that the White Walkers have been kept out, and now they're on the march again. And we've now finally been set up for the endgame scenario of the White Walkers are now south. They have a dragon. Shit's gonna get real. We gotta really get into what's going on and see what's gonna be happening. So I'm really excited to see where season 8 is gonna be going, and I really enjoyed this episode, seeing what they were able to do, bringing all the plot points together, giving us the information needed, and setting up all of our in-game scenarios. So those are my opinions on the episode. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked it, if you didn't like it, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me. Also, like and subscribe, and I hope you have a good day.